Well, it's time to replace my old heavy bags. They have served me well and have been well used and taped up like crazy. These bags are made of very tough, very durable buffalo hide from Southeast Asia. These things are tough, especially where there's 8 layers of duct tape covering them. This is not an easy bag to cut. And here is what we found when we were playing with knives. We even had some large bladed items, and I'll tell you what, this kind of material is not easy to get through. But we tried many different blades, and we talked about what we experienced, and we got some data from stabbing and cutting these bags. Now, we also added clothing and other material, even many layers of clothing. And there are many factors in the effectiveness of cutting, the effectiveness of stabbing, and the effectiveness in edged weapons. One factor that we found that was very important is, well, you gotta make sure your knife is really, really sharp. If you're not that good on putting an edge on a knife, get somebody who can. Find a professional to keep your knife sharp. Pay a little money, get it razor sharp. This makes a huge difference when cutting. When we were using large blades that have been beaten up and not resharpened, they weren't as effective as a sharp blade at getting through the material. Now, I know it would make a difference if we were hitting into flesh, absolutely. But the sharpness of your weapon is very important. It's a very important factor to take into. Length of weapon made a difference, but one of the biggest differences was the shape of the weapon. In a recurve or inward curve, like a hawkbill kind of edge, you could slash very effectively. The hawkbill and the recurve were the best slashing weapons that we tried. In fact, the cold steel Desperado would tear apart the bag and tear apart clothing on a quick snap cut. The Desperado cut so well that I believe it was one of the most effective slashers that we had. Interestingly enough, the 2 handmade knives that I have from Jeff Hardy and Flanders Forge in Wausau, BC, performed excellently on slashes. Now there's the unzipper from Topps Knife on a reinforced back cut, which is what it's designed to do. It was absolutely horrendous how brutally it would cut through material. That is an effective cutting weapon. I think it's very specialized for what tactics it's meant to be used with, but for the tactics that it is designed to be used with, it is an excellent knife. Out of my folding knives, the cold steel extra large clip point or Bowie Voyager, the one with the Nogales clip point, worked very well. Now here I'm using a cold steel Assegai, and it is an effective thrusting weapon, very effective. I believe that would be one of the most deadly weapons that I own. But, my cold steel Viking axe. what's interesting here is how effectively that beak was in a stab. When I pulled it back, you'll see in a minute here where I pull that beak in. Like, it just went in like nothing. Hooking the inside of the groin or something like that with that thing would be horrendous. Here's Keith using the cold steel as a guy, and again, much better for thrusting than slashing, but it can effectively slash. Now, I have to say that Tantos did not perform as well on thrusts as I had hoped. My little cold steel hideout dagger just went in and out like nothing, and you couldn't even feel any resistance on it. It just performed excellently. Now, the Tanto may not be the best stabber. It was okay at slashing, but it could have been better if I had it a little sharper, I'm sure. That was my K-bar given to me by my friend Mike Muel. Now, this was an interesting thing. The recurve on this worked really well in slashes. It's a heavy blade. I'm not sure what the make or manufacturer is on this knife, but again, not a great stabber, but slashing with this thing was pretty effective. The reason I was exploring slashing so deeply was because as a Filipino martial artist, the slash is very important because we do a lot of it. It is now an instinctive part of my fighting skills. So I wanted to see which knives were best for a slash. If you are like me and have done a lot of stick training, you really have to relearn how you slash with a sword. This is another factor in what is effective and what isn't. The sword slashing is not the same as striking with a stick, but that's something that I will address in a future video maybe. But realistically, when you're slashing with a sword, you should slash with it and not hit with it, which is a habit that I have to break. But with knives and short weapons, the pressure cut is the best as far as slashing goes. However, if you train in Filipino martial arts, you probably are very good at sniping targets with quick slashes. So I would recommend, if you believe that you may have to go knife to knife at some point, or if you just want to be able to do that just in case, I would say carry a large folder, like an extra large Voyager, the Cold Steel Frenzy, something of that size, because then you can stay back, use your footwork, get in and out, and use sniping cuts that will be effective. However, after doing this, I believe that you need to be thrust-centric in your approach of the combative use of the knife. Thrusting seems to penetrate deeper and potentially has the ability to cause more deep tissue and organ damage, to cause more shock, especially if you're thrusting and twisting and tearing that wound open a lot more. These are ugly thoughts, but this is the reality of using a knife combatively. It's not something I would ever want to do. It's not something I would ever want to look to do in a self-defense situation, but in the worst case scenario, it can be something that you might be able to save your own life with. And that's why we train this stuff. We don't train it to be a life taker. We train it to be a life saver. If you don't have that attitude, you shouldn't be training edged weapons at all. At the end of the day, we completely destroyed my old bags, ripped them open, got the rags out of there for the new bags to stuff them, and I think, for me, this was very educational and gave me a deeper understanding of cut and thrust and edged weapons in a way that really helped me, help my journey, help my focus on what I want to train, and also gave me a better idea of what knives to carry. This is the Cold Steel Desperado, and it is a great slasher. I think this serrated recurve edge is one of the best weapons for that. The Flanders Forge Eisenhower commemorative knife, the Tops Unzipper, the Cold Steel Desperado, the Cold Steel Voyager with the recurve, and the Foolhardy Forge Soul Taker were the best slashers of the bunch. The best thrusting knives were the CRKT Shrill, the Cold Steel Hideout Dagger, and the Foolhardy Forge Soul Taker. The Foolhardy Forge was in the tops in both thrusting and slashing. More on that in a follow-up video. Thank you.